Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of the Brainstorm. I'm doing the intro today. We've had several technical difficulties. We're on our sixth or seventh re-record of this segment, but we're striving for perfection. Today, we have Andrew Kim with us, and he is going to break down the Epic versus Google news. Andrew, take it away.
Sure. So to set the stage a little bit, in 2021, Epic Games lost its antitrust suit against Apple under a district court decision, which was largely upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2023. However, Epic won a similar case against Google this past week. A 9-person jury completely sided with Epic, finding that Google engaged in anti-competitive conduct to exert monopoly power over its Google Play App Store. We don't know what the actual penalties will be, given that Epic did not sue for monetary damages, and both parties will have the option to appeal next month. We are also simultaneously awaiting the Supreme Court's decision to review Apple and Epic's appeals following the earlier trials that happened in 2021 and 2023.
And so if they're not going for monetary damages here, what are they going after?
Sure. Well, if we see, Tim Sweeney, what he's been talking about over the past couple of years, Tim Sweeney, on behalf of developers and consumers, is expressing immense frustration over the App Store, both Apple and Google's App Store's high commissions, right? In that Google and Apple both charge up to 30% in commissions over in-app purchases and subscriptions, etc. That all occur that are all distributed through their app stores, and consumers are hurt because they are overpaying for digital goods in Epic's view, as a result of Google and Apple's kind of monopolistic imposition of high fees, and developers are also hurt because, of course, the effect on consumers, but also how much they can take back into their own pockets, and also having to face rigidity, right, with respect to how they distribute their apps, what third-party payment choices they have, etc. So Epic is not suing for monetary damages. They're just looking for regulation to level the playing field a bit, so that we can have a fairer mobile app ecosystem.
What do Apple and Google say in their defense? How do they defend the 30% take rate on digital services?
I would say that the narrative primarily revolves around safety, right? In that, like spinning up a third-party app store not regulated by Apple, for example, would lead to maybe less regulated apps kind of being distributed to consumers, maybe with malicious code in it, etc. So they have been talking about it mainly around. They've been more or less fear-mongering, right, with respect to security and just general lack of regulation that would ensue with third-party app stores. But a rebuttal would be that many successful app stores exist, right, outside of the mobile app store ecosystems, right? Epic has a game store, Steam has a game store. All these various platforms seem to be doing a pretty good job regulating what's listed and what's distributed through their app stores. But yeah, I would say, to your original question, that seems to be the primary narrative. But I mean, there's a lot to the defense as well, right?
Yeah, of course.
And then I think, Andrew, another thing you were mentioning in the Epic loss against Apple, that was a judge. And this time in Epic's victory over Google, you said a 9-person jury. Are you saying that this is indicative of something the public feels maybe more than the legal stance, or what's your read on this?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you just said, right? In that I have no um, you know, backing to kind of predict what like the future courts will decide. But it seems as though the unanimous jury decision in Google versus Epic's case at least indicates how the broader public feels about the App Store's place in the overall mobile app ecosystem and how much power Apple and Google wield.
And how do you think about this in relation to, this other simultaneous battle that Apple and Google are fighting, which is trying to prevent additional app stores from popping up in their ecosystem? I'm also thinking about where Fortnite is headed, where Roblox is. Gaming in general seems to be pushing towards platforms and app stores as, mobile apps. So you go into Fortnite, you have several different game modes that starts to feel like its own app ecosystem. And Apple, it seems, has always fought against that. They typically try to combat that. How does that fit into this? Do you think, does this win maybe open the door for that? Do you think this is, going to lead to kind of broader acceptance of these new app stores popping up into these mobile ecosystems? Or am I conflating two different battles?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at the EU, for example, we're already seeing hints of like side loading, right? Which is the ability to download apps outside of one's app, outside of like the main app store, kind of becoming more and more of a reality, right? In that, I think following Spotify's complaints, right, against Apple and their high commissions, like starting nearly 4 years ago, the EU seems to be now kind of cracking down starting in 2024, and with like the Digital Markets Act, which also requires big tech to be in compliance by sometime in 2024. I'm not sure when, to enable kind of third-party payment services to be a part of kind of app developers' toolkits, and also having the ability to download things through third-party app stores, etc. And also, you can't forget, the DOJ's fight against Google too, right, regarding its search engine monopoly. So it seems like all these different cases are at least leaning towards the kind of idea that like these like third-party app stores, maybe commanded by Roblox or by Fortnite, is going to be more and more of a reality. Um, but I guess another tangential question that I have for you is, it seems like thinking about Roblox's experiences as like a discovery, like a pretty static discovery platform, right? Or like a search engine on its own does resemble app stores today, right? But like if we think about more and more immersive ways to jump from experience to experience, does that constitute an app store, right? As in, how you go on to Roblox, right? And then you see all these experiences, right? With like boxes to essentially label what each experience entails. That does look like an app store. But like if we were to imagine like portals, right, branded portals for example, in which a player could jump from one experience to another seamlessly. Are you jumping from app to app, right? Like who knows?
Right. Yeah, no, I think
And
that's a good question. And it's like, I think hard to define what the next stage of mobile compute looks like and how app stores will feel and look. I think it will get more immersive, more 3D by nature. And to your point, the experience of going from app to app may feel a lot more seamless than it does today, where you're, exiting out of one app, going into another. Instead, you may just be walking through these portals, or you may just have, buttons and shortcuts to just bring you from different experience to a different experience. So, I think it's a ultimately a potentially a losing battle for Apple and Google. I side with the platforms here. They're not small. Roblox and Epic and Fortnite, these are not small platforms by any means. But I do hope that, this opens the door to just a more democratized mobile ecosystem.
well, I think, and there's also a couple trends that I think you're both touching on, right? We've been talking about this closed ecosystem versus open source, which I think ties in here. But then at the other side of it, Nick, is something you've spoken about, which is just the amount of content and AI generated applications, all these different things, where curation becomes even more important than it is today, right? Like there's already a huge need for curation, and that is pretty much what Google and Apple are saying is their defense is, hey, we're curating this in a good way. It's safe,
Yeah.
secure, and maybe that goes more AI curation, but it does seem like curation is going to become more important than ever with this explosion in creation of content and applications.
Yeah, and maybe that ends up playing into Apple and Google's hands over time, right? Saying, we have experience in being able to curate and combat copycat applications and, making sure your content and the content that you see is appropriate. And I think people do actually appreciate that safety argument to a certain standpoint. But I think tying the safety to then a specific take rate, I think there's some leaps in logic potentially there over time. That's just kind of my personal opinion. But I would agree with you, Sam. I think the AI piece of this, we don't know how that's going to play into, copycat applications. If it brings down the cost to create, and you can, see an application today and create it in, the next few days using an AI generated toolkit, how do you then feel comfortable building for a specific ecosystem if there's not someone there actually gatekeeping those additional solutions that are coming on?
But like, I don't know, like like AI, if like algorithmic recommendations become so good, wouldn't it get harder and harder for, let's say, smaller, malicious or unsafe apps to even like get the eyeballs, like get a sufficient audience, right? As in, like,
I don't know,
No.
Andrew. TikTok's got a pretty big audience.
I know,
Well,
and
I think
like,
it will depend on who is essentially running that ecosystem, because you could see an ecosystem popping up that's AI generated search, and there's behind the scenes like a very vicious pay to play type of atmosphere, so that anytime you do search for something, it's just whoever wants to pay the most to be at the top, and you don't really understand that because maybe the app ecosystem, it's not as brand heavy anymore, because I think that's kind of how AI search is trending. It doesn't, at least the way that we've been searching with it recently. So I think you have to place your trust into a potential central, authority governing body. And I think that's kind of the role that Apple and Google have played for the mobile ecosystem. How AI changes that, I think, is yet to be determined, but it could potentially, I think, help Apple and Google, unfortunately.
right, right. But I guess we're kind of thinking about App Store experiences in a very binary way right now, in that it's safe on the Apple App Store, and then the alternative is Pirate Bay, right? But it's not, right? We have the Steam Store, we have the Epic Game Store. Like, we do have smaller intermediaries that can, I think, carry out that job that you're talking about. Um, so I don't know. I'm not sure if it heavily reverts back in Apple and Google's favor necessarily. Um, Given that we can assume that there are some competent and good actors within that spectrum, right?
I totally agree. Yeah, I'm not saying Apple and Google are the only trusted app stores out there. I think just the scale to which they operate gives them an advantage if the scale of content creation explodes like the way we think it will with AI, right? For a
Right.
Steam to
And
be able to combat that is much harder than, Apple or Google. Apple and Google have 10, 100 times more resources to do this than a Steam does. So I think of it from that high level, and I could totally be wrong.
right. And it's also just user attention span. Right. I think if you take a step even further back, right, it all comes down to people competing for time and attention. And it's like, I'm not going to search for different app stores. It's like you're going to have your default, and then maybe you'll have your spare, but I doubt you're going 4 search engines down. Nick, I think someone's calling you. But right, I doubt you're going 4 app stores deep to find things.
Yeah, maybe that's a new business model then. App Store aggregators, App Store over App
Do
Stores.
well, I was just thinking, do they even have that for video yet? I guess Roku is kind of that for
Oh, like
um,
aggregating
like
publishers?
Prime, Netflix,
Yeah, Roku.
right? It's like if I search a movie, is that it, right? Roku kind of does
Roku.
that
And you could
on the
consider
streaming layer.
Amazon Prime itself also an aggregator of different publishers, right? And on top of that is Roku, right? So, um,
So you're telling me it's aggregators all the way down.
yeah, aggregators. If you've read Ben Thompson, it's all about aggregators, right? Aggregation theory. That seems to still
All
hold.
right. Well, I guess we can wrap up and say, see you later, aggregator.
Ha 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 ha.
Oh boy. And I think we had a topic today and we somehow managed to slip AI into the conversation. So we're keeping our streak alive of AI every week for this, which is, we didn't need to go there, but we did. And it, I think,
And
worked.
and we've got holidays next week. So if you're gonna skip a week, we wish you happy holidays. And if not, Nick, I think we're still gonna try and record one.
I'm game if you're game.
Sounds good. See everyone next week. Andrew,
See you, everyone.
thanks for joining.
Thank you.